that it was touched on earlier that we had some phenomenal kitchen cabinet conversations. But we just have a little bit of time to find out, is there anything that is really critical that one or two or three of you want to share for the benefit of the whole group, especially around the issue of equitable development? And there's maybe just a couple of voices that could be lifted in terms of what you think is really critical for everybody to hear that came out of the kitchen cabinet conversations. Is there anyone that wants to share?
My name is Wanda Lowe Anderson, and we looked at the equitable development as well as grassroots organizations having one voice. And we defined equitable development as smart growth, needs of underserved communities, and those two matters overlapping would create equitable development. And we said it's an approach to meet the needs of underserved communities and individuals through projects, programs, and/or policies that reduce disparities while fostering places that are healthy, vibrant, and diverse. We looked at some of the issues in terms of grassroots having one voice. Is that something that I should talk about?
We just
So we were saying that one, you have to have a strategy, you have to have strong leadership. Just like this building the engine, the fuel for those to build the engine is the grassroots organizations as well as the development organizations. And if you can have a refueler or a defueler, which is negative energy, you have to have that positive energy. So you have to let your people be heard, you listen to them, you have a strategic plan, you have to have energy that is positive because it motivates and it sends a message to the entire group that this is the goals and objective of our organization and here's where we're going.
Thank you. Is there one or two other that, again, it's critical? I just want to remind everyone, we have the index cards. If there's anything that you want to be able to say, but we don't have time to say, all of the notes from the conversation are going to be, provided as part of the next steps in this process. But is there any other one or two groups that just wants to share a point or two about equitable development or something critical that came out of your conversation? All right, I guess we're good. And if so, let me know. We want to now move to talking about our definition for community development. So again, this is something that has been developed over time, but we do think that it is important to touch bases so that we can hear from you. Is this still representing what you believe to be a good working definition of community development? Is there anything that's missing or needs to be added? Not that we want to wordsmith, but just we want to find out from today's conversation, is there anything when we look at this definition that community development organizations are known as CDOs in Detroit? And again, I won't read the whole thing because you have it in your packet. Is there anything we need to discuss as relates to just the basic definition, the working definition that we've been utilizing for this initiative? Any feedback, any questions, comments on this definition? So this will then...
I know in the, at least one planning team, and I'm going to call out the Career and Education Pathways planning team. That planning team, in its report, talks about a different role for CEOs or an additional role. Does somebody from that planning team want to speak about that? It's the sustained voice. Is Sonia not here? Okay. Well, let me just say I could channel Sonia, but go ahead.
Sure. So in part, it's captured in that definition that's up there, but I think it wasn't really pulled out or called out. So the idea of a sustained advocate, that the government or philanthropy, what they're focused on, what they do or where they do it may ebb and flow, and community development organizations have to respond and do different services depending on what is offered. So the idea is that no matter what is happening in that larger ecosystem, a community development organization is the sustained advocate over time, or the sustained voice for that particular neighborhood. And then I think the only thing I would add is that just it's a lot of words, and I don't know if people are really had time to read it.
No.
Yeah. So yes, so wordsmithing maybe would be appropriate.
This is a comment on the existing geographies. says respecting the census tract boundary should be a high priority. Try not to split zip codes. Everyone is familiar with their zip code. It's a fallacy to think that everyone knows their hood. Morningside has existed for 40 years, yet door-to-door surveys reveal that most 60 to 70% don't know they live in Morningside. How are traditional place-based place-making organizations included in the analysis of coverage map? Metrics, i.e. vitality, capacity, and careers. This one says, regarding the map clusters and the statistical map, think about the marketing of the maps. How many numbers and names do residents and CEOs need to remember and keep track of? Make it simple as possible, so the map is easily adopted and used effectively. This says, thought to consider regarding capacity building and planning, defining capacity building, and how that term can alienate potential TA providers, small business, peer-to-peer, etc. Capacity building is very much a community development term and not used widely. This is what I think starts on this page. It says, research data and evaluation planning team comments, cautious about using the word cluster, as this is a terminology used in the 2009 adopted City of Detroit Master Plan of Policy. This may be confusing due to multiple understandings of the term cluster. I also encourage the use of census block analysis per the census tract suggestion discussion. Could be that last little bit. Then it says, neighborhood names are not what DLBA staff determine, residents determine their neighborhood names. What did the other benchmark cities use regarding research? Any insights gleaned? And these all kind of came to me throughout the day. We need a flexible system that allows us to look at different levels of community for different challenges and needs. 39 cluster groups, 208 neighborhoods for other purposes. A couple more. We have social cohesion seem to be presented as a sidecar to the main vehicle of community development. Nice to have, makes the main work easier. For communities like Chicago and Detroit, where residents and poor human development stats in the way, or status is in the way, I'm not sure I'm able to read this right. I could read it earlier, but now I'm saying it. Linking community potential, shouldn't building social cohesion be primary? I think the primary point that social cohesion should be a primary goal in part of the train, not a sidebar. If social cohesion is a necessary condition, should it be a major goal of our industry to equip CEOs to help neighborhoods achieve social cohesion? That is, neighborhoods that are safe, stable, supportive, and productive. Regarding career and education pathways, Sarita touched on resident compensation, which is a huge point. Another aspect of that I am hoping to be touched on is salary, i.e. the community development world, which can certainly not be appealing as other industries. How can we also close the salary gap in our field without people feeling, for lack of a better term, guilty of wanting or needing a solid salary and compensation package? And then last but not least, community statistical areas, roads, highways, freeways, clustering of retail, churches, services, resident perceptions, reverse Airbnb, real estate listings, etc. Age of bonus housing, should boundaries be down, or alleys, census tract, etc. So again, some of those don't directly relate to this, but I just want to make sure that those voices were placed in the room as we continue to support you using the index cards. Any other comments in terms of the definition of community development, and then moving on to should we update or change any aspect of it, and including any aspect of the key roles and responsibilities?
So in the definition, it says a CEO is a professional place-based organization accountable to local stakeholders who compromise the majority of the board of directors, and it doesn't speak specifically to residents. Okay. I think
to speak specifically to residents is what you're
Right.
trying to do. Great, thank you.
If you're developing a community, you should live there. I think the majority of people should be the people that live there. I'm crazy, but.
Great. Well, I know we have a number of other things on the agenda, so if there are any other comments or questions about our definition or the role related to community development, please feel free to use the index cards and provide that feedback. Next, I believe Jane is going to come up with the next discussion.
Can I make one comment? So I appreciate that we're trying to move this thing along time-wise, but we really, as we move into 2018, we really rely on the general direction we get from meetings like this. So when Chandra says, is there feedback on the definition? From my perspective as the manager of the initiative, that is no joke. We really need to understand if this definition is still good enough for our context in 2018. Or if there's something about it that needs to change. So I know we need more time and maybe we can come back to it, but I'm asking you to really look hard at that. There's a comment about how, it's one thing to say there should be majority stakeholder on the board. And this comment was, no, there should be majority residents on the board. That's significant. And we listen for that kind of stuff. So I'm just asking you to put in your 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 cents. And there's
All right. Well, since you opened it up, we're a business association. We are, a development organization, but we're a business association. So our stakeholders are businesses. So, we don't necessarily have residents on the board. We work to try to find some of the local business owners who may or may not still live in the neighborhood. Many of them originated there. But, we also have corporate interests in our neighborhood, or larger interests. So, part of our struggle is we've got residential interests, we have small business interests, and we have corporate interests. And so part of it is that balance between them, how to not let the industrial corporate kind of take over and make sure, resident spaces are there and green and healthy, but also promoting the small business owners. So, for us, stakeholder has, a very definition. It isn't just residents or just small businesses.
Maybe we need to parse that out a little better with the language about how, depending on the goal of the community development organization, defines who the majority stakeholders should be,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Lauren, can you put the slide back on the actual definition?
So, Lizzie may have been making a comment as Jeff, but I do agree that it's this. And one of the things we always notice is that it says a lot of, a CDO is not. Why don't we just put some bullets and kind of like not what it's not, or at least try to be a little bit more clear about what it is.
Right.
Okay. So if there aren't any other comments, then, there's an opportunity, please, jot a note on your card. You can follow later via email so that we can make sure that the next iteration of the definition, that your perspectives are incorporated. I want to shift gears very quickly because all of this conversation we want to culminate in getting a sense of the extent to which there's consensus around the recommendations that we shared with you earlier. And so we're going to talk briefly, go back and take a look at the recommendations from the Career Education Pathways Planning Team. And so this is a handout that you have with you, so don't have to worry about reading it on the screen. And basically there were 5 recommendations, one around creating and committing to a 5-year goal. The second recommendation around identifying different academic pathways for community development, education, and training. The third recommendation around providing customized support to help individuals in the community development field from a career standpoint. The fourth, to support professional development opportunities. We had a lot of conversation around that earlier also. And then the fifth recommendation, to facilitate mobility among community development sectors by building cross-sector trust, collaboration, and transferable skills. So So what we would like to get a sense of is, the extent to which there is consensus, if there are any significant issues or questions that any of you have related to these recommendations. It still is a work in progress, but this is part of the point of today was to check the pulse and see, to make sure that we all stay on the same page moving forward. And so any comments, feedback, questions, or is there, yes, there's a question. I don't see a hand.
Right there.
I'm right here.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I can be loud. I'm just wondering if the point that Sarita made earlier about, one, providing opportunities for like our residents, the people that we serve, that help us move this work forward, is implied in any of those, or do we need to say it a little bit more explicitly to make sure that there is mobility, career mobility among the residents that we serve in this area of work?
Okay, so the answer is yes to that. That needs to be added to that, and so we'll make sure that that's incorporated. Any other feedback in terms of career education and pathways?
I would
Yes.
like to see a little bit more dedicated language for organizations to really do some kind of internal evaluation of how they're putting together job descriptions. Rita mentioned that, and what are the actual processes that they have in place and policies in place to be able to support now these recommendations.
Okay, processes and policies to support them. So just having some additional detail probably behind all of the recommendations, so that it provides more clarity around how it's going to actually happen.
I think Shamil's saying something different. I thought you were saying that you want organizations to start acting now on these recommendations.
Absolutely.
But having some additional clarity and detail around how, what the processes are that will make it happen, yes. Sarita?
Is there a reason 5 years? Is there some kind of work plan that says this is what we're gonna do every year towards this? I'm just wondering why a 5-year goal at this. Is that broken down into like what we're gonna do every year or what?
This is not yet broken down as I understand it. So is there a
I
question
think there should
around
just be
5
some
years?
clarity as to why 5 years. Why not 3 years? Why
Okay.
not 2? What do we, how does that look? Why, I'm assuming they didn't just randomly 5 years. So that's why I think there should just be an explanation of why 5.
Or why have it? I mean, could you not create a committee that goal period without
Yeah.
attaching a time frame to it?
And that kind of goes to Shamil's point about how if there's ways to start acting on this now,
Right.
you don't have to wait 5 years.
You don't have to wait 5 years, or you don't have to limit it to a 5-year time frame, but yes, exactly.
We're not sure if this was the basis, but most business plans have a 5-year goal. And that may have been what they took that from.
Yeah, many of them do, that is correct. That doesn't necessarily mean that it would have to be stuck in there.
Right.
So, yes. Teresa?
Yeah, the acquiring values kind of didn't sit with me well, because I think people who come into the field of community development already have some kind of value that makes them want to be there. I don't know that you can bring somebody in and teach them to have that community value. Unless they're willing to, that just is kind of a little odd to me. So I don't know.
Yeah, that would be debated.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Just a little background, that did not originally make it on the list of what's needed to be a good practitioner. And then somebody said, the value set is important. And then somebody else said, well, how do you train to values? And I don't think we ever really answered the question, but it felt like it had to be there.
Yeah.
What might be related to?
Yeah.
I would say about SMART goals, and so, and thinking, I was looking through the packet, there's not like one overarching theme that unifies, like what are you trying to achieve through all the recommendations? And so is it to increase, number of professionals, is it to increase, like what are these recommendations trying to achieve as a whole? Really unify
Higher
everything.
level, right.
And then also I want to touch back on what Rita said too, because I feel like I'm in the same situation. or part of what I'm doing is community development. So how do you be more inclusive, and especially as we're talking about equity and, you know, making this profession even more equitable, especially in development as a whole. So for those of us who, you know, might not define ourselves from like a classically trained, you know, CE professional, how do you have language that makes it inclusive, that you're not excluding those who maybe in fields that, you know, affect development, but might not be, you know, defined as classically or, you know, trained or academically trained.
Okay. And language to include that, yes.
I guess I'm also looking at, maybe there's already some data around this, but do we know how many jobs and positions there's going to be in 5 years or 3 years? Because I think that we want to be able to develop the workforce and the skill set of the individuals as they have jobs. Because if we put a whole lot of people out there very quickly, they're going to get paid even less because there's more demand, and that doesn't help anyone. So I think with the research, we have also the data committee. So maybe there needs to be some integration so that we can actually have year 1, year 2, year 3, year, right?
Right, and I think that's an excellent point and would make the distinction between an action strategy that kind of spells out the detail of how many, what, and when, and the overarching goals and recommendations. So I think we need to take note of that as we're moving forward and digging even deeper. But let me ask the question with the input that we've heard this afternoon from you, understanding we need to make some adjustments. Is this generally palatable to the group, to you as community development stakeholders? Okay, so no one's going to throw themselves from their chair on the floor. Okay, that's what we want. Okay. So we're short on time, so let's keep going. So the next planning team was capacity building. Yep. Okay. So these recommendations fell in 2 key buckets. One, the strategy of creating a central clearinghouse, and the other around establishing some design guidelines for the capacity building system. So for the recommendation related to the clearinghouse approach, it's, you know, states, and it's in your handout, that there's a function that's embedded inside an organization, and a lot of the detail obviously is not here. What organization, you know, is this a new organization, is this an existing organization? The clearinghouse is managing the TA providers and handling the intake of and referrals of CDOs and GROs to providers. They're not providing one-on-one support, and establishing criteria for TA provider inclusion. The design guidelines so far, and this, you know, these may also be revised moving forward, is that there will be a combination of free and fee-for-service capacity building to CDOs and GROs. The services will be linked to the neighborhood success metrics, so that if you have success metrics, there needs to be some capacity building to help organizations get to that. More focus on one-to-one coaching, because that's what the research has shown to be the most effective. The clearinghouse is a coordinator. TA providers will be convened regularly to share learnings and best practices. There'll be guidelines for levels of service based on an organization's capacity. So it won't be one size fits all, because organizations will come with varying degrees of capacity and expertise, and will need, you know, various levels of support. And then the evaluation of capacity building services will be built into this. So as broad recommendations from the capacity building planning team, are there any significant issues or questions or suggestions that you'd like to make here? Or is this generally moving in the direction that in a direction that you can agree with? Yes, one choice. Okay. All right. So don't feel that if you have shut, so it's not, if you're driving on your way home, then by all means pull over.
I mean, I would say for this one, I mean, all three of them, they meet like the one, what's the theme, like what's the overall goal, like, and then having the SMART goals, action items, and things.
Right.
Because like looking through, like, well, what were we trying to achieve by having a clear month, what are we trying to achieve by, that's really,
And I think that's an excellent point. If there's an overarching goal for each of the planning teams, as well as something for everything, so that it just ties the whole process together.
I'm thinking that every system element needs a SMART goal attached to it. Yeah. So that we talk less about the elements and more about where we want to go.
I think that the findings, right, really inform the creation of the recommendation. So if there's a way to point, I don't know how to do it in formatting, but if there's a way to sort of say, this is the rationale why these steps are necessary now. This is what the data, this is how the data led us.
Okay, yep. Yes.
I'd just like to say that these are all good foundations, that we don't want to close ourselves in if there was something that needed to be changed, that there is flexibility to switch it up and move forward instead of, letting
Oh, no, that's what I was just saying a few minutes ago, was that, yes. We do want to get a sense that, okay, generally this is moving in the right direction today before we leave, but no, that's why I said that. So, Teresa?
It's very academic language, and so at some point turning into common English,
Right.
because it just is like, what does that mean?
Yes.
I'm like reading it over and over the sentence and trying to understand what the author meant. So, it's just switching it.
And making it more user-friendly. And that's what's going to happen also as we take you may recall earlier, the definitions of neighborhood vitality they were very academic in nature, and it needs to be something that's much more accessible. So very good point. So we will segue then, I guess, to the RD&E. Yes. So the recommendations here fell in 3 buckets, really. One is the success framework. The recommendation that neighborhood vitality is the name of the frame that we're going to be working with, and that there'll be a vision statement crafted based on these definitions here that are also in your handout, but not verbatim. And so this is, to be seen. So we don't have a draft vision statement yet, but so this is the first recommendation for that. The second set of recommendations is around the indicators. We talked earlier about establishing a core set of indicators that would be measured across neighborhoods or clusters or whatever they're ultimately called in the city. And then also establishing indicators at the system level based on the 7 elements. Those are the recommendations for the indicators. And then finally, the neighborhood success index. The recommendations are to utilize the land bank's map for identifying the neighborhood clusters, that we'll call them that for right this second, with input from the land bank and data-driven Detroit. Now, this is not to say that we're asking for consensus around everything exactly as it is, today, as of 357, but just generally around using the city's map. Also recommending that the core indicators will be measured at the cluster level or whatever that unit of analysis will be called, and citywide using an index that's being developed to measure both progress and outcomes at the cluster and the citywide level. And also recommending that system level change will be measured for the 7 elements based on those indicators, which have yet to be developed. So there's a lot here because there's still a lot to be developed. But are there any aspects of this that you have significant questions about or concerns or we keep moving forward with the understanding that you'll be getting more information, there'll be more opportunity to help shape this as we go forward. Okay, I'm leaving, so we're good. Okay, wait, question in the back, yes.
I guess I'm not totally sold on the clusters.
You mean the name of the cluster?
I mean, I would think that there's different units that different people want to measure at.
For different purposes.
Yes. And so I guess I'm not totally sure who wants to measure it at a cluster level, whereas unless there are natural clustering of communities. So I'm a little concerned about adding another layer if nobody's really asking for data at that scale.
Maggie?
So, you're raising a great point, Tom. What I'll just say is that from day one, from the day this initiative started, maybe going back to when CDAD was doing the original work, it has always come back to, how do we know what to fund? How do we know what to do? How do we know how to support CDOs and grassroots organizations if we don't know what success in neighborhoods means? So I think for us to not try to tackle this on sort of a common, general level is to basically lose the opportunity that all this work is creating to bring resources into the community development system. Yeah, that's the way I'm seeing it. I don't know if philanthropy back there wants to comment on that. But from day one, that is what it's been about. What does success mean? So how can a CDO measure how it's doing? How can a funder know what to fund? How can a capacity builder know if their services are effective if it's not aimed to one place?
I would just add to that it's not an either or. So a neighborhood could measure indicators, and they may measure indicators that aren't core indicators. There may be other indicators that they want to select from. So it doesn't rule out measuring that at the neighborhood level. But there has to be a practical, manageable way to do this across the city. Yes.
And I would add specifically as it relates to measuring the effectiveness of the system, right? We're trying to sort of improve and build upon the community development system in the city. And so how do you measure that effectiveness as a system? Yes, it might be cluster information and data may be useful for local neighborhoods, but it's definitely useful for figuring out how to measure a citywide system, which is what building the engine is supposed to be about.
Yes.
If I could add one more point. I think and this is also part of where I'm hoping we can get the temperature of the room. City government has to be invested. There has to be, or it's not going to be embraced to the depth that it needs to be embraced. And that's part of why I think we have to go in this direction. So there's not a mayor on the planet who doesn't have a set of success metrics. Our current mayor has very clear metrics that he wants his performance to be measured by. There isn't a CDO in the room or anywhere in Detroit that doesn't have an idea of what measurement means, but they have to work together in order to be embraced, in order to be properly resourced, in order to have better neighborhoods. That's kind of so I think that part of why we have to do it is because the city needs it. The city needs to know what success means, and they need to help measure it, both for the sake of the politics of the city and for the sake of just being able to have a thriving city.
Right, and the idea was also to try to get everyone on the same page, so you don't have parallel frameworks. Teresa?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that success measures for the people in Del Rey are going to be different to what success means for the people in Springwell. And so my concern, if there's just one success measure that all of us are measured against, that way you guys aren't successful and we're not going to fund you anymore. So that's my concern about this whole thing, that it's setting some groups up, some neighborhoods up for failure because they're not going to meet whatever that level of success is. Because either their
Right.
resources are different or what they view as residents as success is not what another neighborhood views. So that's the only thing I'm
So let me just.
feeling cautious about.
Right, so, yes, so the idea is to identify indicators, the core set of indicators that people agree, safety is important. Not to say that, a safety level of X is what we've agreed on for all neighborhoods. So it's not to impose an arbitrary or artificial metric across the city. It's to identify with input from various community development stakeholders, what are those indicators that are important to keep track of?
Well, plus we're talking about core. There
Right.
are a few core common indicators, and then a set of indicators that are pertinent to any given neighborhood, depending on what's going on.
Right, and the common indicators will be the indicator, not the metric. It's not going to be tied to a number that may work in one neighborhood and not in another. So Erica, and then I think I have to start to.
I just wanted to piggyback on what Teresa was saying. That was my main concern, and I think that might have been what Tom was trying to say, is I don't mind having a cluster level, but I think you really need to be able to drill down to the neighborhood level for that information.
Right.
To Teresa's point. So I think we need to retain the ability to go at the smaller level.
And the way the framework's structured now, there will be the opportunity to do that.
And
So-
that's not reflected up there.
Well-
That doesn't feel like it's totally.
Okay.
It's not.
All right.
Well, we can work on that. It's great
because
feedback.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah.
And we only wanted to share what we felt like, we were at, what point are we at now that we can bring to the full group?
Right.
And then we dig in and feedback.
But the graphic actually does include the
Yeah.
neighborhood level.
Right,
So,
the graphic is-
right, but yeah, so that will be part of it. So that has been part of the thinking and the conversation so far. We'll make sure that it shows up in the language. So, okay, yes.
I have one quick suggestion about how to deal with the difference between neighborhoods, is that you tie the indicator to a strategy instead of across the board. So in an area that's less populated, maybe their strategy is not to increase population. So if you're looking at population increase as a measure of health for a neighborhood, it wouldn't be the strategy for the neighborhood that's not the strategy that they picked.
And
So if you tie it to strategy.
Exactly, and it's likely that wouldn't be a core indicator anyway, because a core indicator has to be an indicator that would apply across neighborhoods regardless of whether they're just trying to not continue to lose so much population as opposed to gaining population. So, as far as the core indicators are concerned. Are there other thoughts? Is this generally still understanding that there needs to be some more, it's a work in progress? Is this, Mike?
Yeah, having worked with Erica very closely, you might have some key indicators that might share.
I think that we're avoiding any specific indicators at this point, but I do think that we have some work to do in terms of like laying out more of our work, and I think that that's been a common theme throughout all three of the planning teams. Like, we're trying to condense a lot of really hard work and lots of long conversations into 2 slides, and that's really challenging, right? So I think there's an opportunity to get more of that on paper and make sure that it's circulated around to the entire stakeholder group, because it's really important to understand the nuance and the context and the flexibility that we're envisioning for the system, because I think all of the points that I've heard about this particular planning team, and I totally agree. This is spot on, and it's really great to have that fed back and to be able to hear all of that information from folks. So it's great.
Okay. So I will turn it over to you.
Sounds good. So where are my morning people? Who's a morning person in here? You are dying right now, I know you are. Okay, all right, so I'm trying to wrap this up, and I got 5 minutes shaved off of my time right now, so I will speed it up. But I do want to say before I get started that this feedback that we had is really the most important piece of helping to build the engine of community development in Detroit, is to hear your feedback, and we've got copious notes that people have been taking all throughout the day. So we are so appreciative of your engagement, your high level engagement, all the way through 4:10 this evening. So thank you so much for that. What I want to do now is, because it seems like there's a lot of energy in here from, the research and the planning piece of it, but now what do we do next? I feel like there's a lot of energy in the room for people to want to do something next, to do some action, right? To do something about what you've heard. At least it feels that way to me. So in thinking about what building the engine on community development in Detroit will do in 2018, there is a structure for that. So I just want to introduce you to the structure. I'll do that. And then I want to invite you to consider a few things in just a few minutes. So the core partners, you've heard that name over and over again, Michigan Nonprofit Association, Lawrence Tech University, as well as CDAG, Community Development Advocates of Detroit. Those are the core partners, and we have Maggie DeSantis, who has been the manager of the initiative, and we actually help provide the plan and the work for Maggie to do and to carry out. That is our role. And then there's the advisory council, which I know some of you in this room are actually on the advisory council. And these are leaders from key stakeholder groups, core partners, but everything that's been represented. I don't want to go through the slides there, you can read that, but it's a very diverse group of stakeholders that make up the advisory council. So then there are some task force that I want to talk to you specifically about today. And these task forces are designed to move from this notion of research and planning and talking about work to actually doing the work. So many of the comments that you have around, we need to refine this, we need to change this, your input is helping to refine that, but the task force will actually have the rubber meet the road, and we'll be able to make some of these changes. So I'll go through these task forces. You can go ahead and advance the slide. So the first task force, now, as I'm talking through these, I want you to see yourself in the work. Now, there's some task force already. I already know what's ahead. You don't know what's ahead, unless you looked in your packet, but I know what's ahead. So like Teresa, I know where you're going, right? Certain people have said certain things, and if you don't see yourself, I want to help to identify you, to say you see yourself in the work. What we want to do is introduce you to the task force work, but also to say that we want you to sign up for it. We want you, especially those that were very vocal and have some very great thoughts about it, and those who were really quiet but have some perspective about things. We really want you to think about that. So as I talk through that, you see yourself in the work, then I want you to be able to sign up, right? Okay. And we're also going to have a survey around collaboration too, immediately following this, so I have to get through this very quickly. See yourself in the work, sign up for it, put your money where your mouth is, right? This is the time to do that. So the first one is around vision and values task force. So this is really about the vision and values for community development practice. All right, so this is going to delve very deep into, I think, more of the philosophy and what it really actually means to be in community development. So those of you who really dug deep into what does it mean, the definition of an equitable neighborhood development, those that really felt that was a very visceral conversation for you, I suspect that you might want to dig deep and be part of that particular task force. There are going to be some key questions that this task force will answer, but there will be some key deliverables. So with deliverables, there means work is being done. So right, we're not talking and talking and talking with nothing ending up here. We're going to actually have some deliverables. So we're going to recommend community development strategies to achieve this goal, recommend a model to build and assure a united neighborhood voice. We heard a lot about resident and neighborhood engagement. This is going to be in this task force. Anybody see themselves in that? Just out of curiosity? Sarita sees herself in that. Let's go to the next one. All right, I don't know if there was conversation today because I had to step away earlier in the morning into the afternoon about generating a tax credit program for community development in Detroit and in Michigan. So this was really about a very specific way to sustain community development. How do we capitalize or fund this particular work through a tax credit? So this is very, very specific, but very, very important. We have some examples where this did very well in other communities across the country. We want to see if maybe we can explore that here. So this task force will take a deep dive
into whether this is a viable option. How can we help this happen in Michigan, and also where the city of Detroit is able to benefit. So there's going to be a strategy and coalition to launch a campaign for a tax credit program, and hopefully for a 2019 launch. So there is a specific deliverable. Those of you who are masterminds around this or have some ideas, we need you on this task force. Oh, okay. The next one is creating a city community and development partnership. So this was, a lot of you were very vocal about what does it take for a city and a community to actually have a partnership. So there's some specific deliverables. We mentioned earlier this morning, if you were here this morning, we talked about the capacity building program that we're working with the HRD to look at the Academy Without Walls in the City of Detroit, a capacity building system. Again, looking at developing strategies that leverage the mayor's neighborhood strategy, but also looking at how we do that in tandem with neighborhoods, so it's not done to the neighborhood or to the residents, that it is a true partnership. We also heard and learned from Dr. Kim that when the city and the neighborhoods were working in tandem, that was really the stronger type community development system, so this is important. We want to take a deep dive. If you have the expertise, suggestions, and you see yourself in this work, please identify yourself and be able to sign up for that task force. Next. All right, so this is about overall. So we talked about the tax credit being a way to sustain that and to capitalize and get and fuel cash into the community development system. But there's other ways of also capitalizing the system, and we want to take a deep dive in that. So deliverables here will be a description of elements and associated costs for a robust community development system. What does it take? Recommendation for a diverse system capitalization strategy, including phasing in these things. And first funding commitment ready to launch too is going to be something that this group is going to take a look at. Some key questions about what does it take to really sustain this work in terms of cost, if you see yourself in that. Hopefully we see people in philanthropy, people in banking. I don't know if we have some banking in here, but if you have some ideas, that will be really helpful. Defining neighborhood and community development coverage in neighborhoods. We had some really dynamic conversations about that, somewhat controversial, but a very robust conversation. So the notion of recommending clusters of neighborhoods, building of DON and DLBA map of neighborhoods, something we kind of talked about. We know that there's some mapping that CDAT has done that could be helpful to provide insight to this, but if you see yourself in helping to define defining neighborhoods, this is one for you, and we really want, hopefully, that you'll see yourself in that. Wake up, morning people. Wake up. Okay. All right, Task Force 6, developing an effective intermediary support system for community development in Detroit. We had a really robust conversation in the intermediary one. It was actually very interesting. In some cases, some of us were wondering, are we really intermediaries? What does it even mean to be an intermediary, right, in this work? So clarity on the definition and role of community development intermediary is going to be something that we'll work on amongst other things. Lots of deliverables here, but this is really the core system of support for capacity building for the community development system. So if you see yourself in this work, whether you be an intermediary or not, and you can have something to add to that, this is really extremely important. 7th, creating a success measurement framework. This is speaking to you, Teresa, and Erica over here, not Erica Riley, but this Erica here, talking about success framework. So how do we actually look at success? What does that mean? And you also had, I don't know your name, I would have called you out, but you had some really interesting things about how do you look at success and looking at strategy. So I see that you could really contribute to this if that's something that's speaking to your soul. We hope that it is. Deliverables here is a fully formed success framework for Detroit neighborhoods, including a progress measurement system and a strategy to collect primary data, amongst other things that we'll be looking at for key deliverables. If you really care about what the success framework looks like, you have something to add and contribute to that, we need you on this task force. And building a career pipeline, Raul, I'm sorry, did I say Raul? Okay, yeah, I think you're in there. Building a career pipeline for our Detroit community development practitioners, very, very important. Very important to help people find a way to this particular field. So we'll be examining the career pathway. I'm not sure if it's a deliverable or not, but I know that we talked about compensation too. So that might be a conversation where compensation is talked about in this particular task force. So if you see yourself in there, you can contribute to that. We'd love to have you in that. And I think this is the final one, the next one. Oh, that's it. Man, I tried to talk talk fast, guys. It's 4:20. All right. So, how many of you saw yourselves at least in the work a little bit? Humor me. Fantastic. All right, so one of the key things that I want you to know is that some of the advisory council members are actually going to be on these task force. And so one time before, in 2017, the planning committees actually really reported to the core partners of four, altogether with Maggie, maybe 4 of us that were coming, the information was coming in that direction. Now we're really trying to get a firm governance structure, if you will, for a community development system. So this is kind of taking all that theory and all of that and moving it into action and creating a system of support for that. So this is a very, very important difference for how work was done in 2017, where in 2018 it'll be much more structured. So at this point, I think I'm concluded.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm asking everybody, please, and you know me, so I'm gonna chase after you if you don't find me first.
And we all,
Tell me what
yeah.
task force you're interested in.
And we do strategize, and we'll put your name on the list and just go punch you. We'll punch you down. So you can, come forward, or we can hunt you down. Those are the choices. All right, thank you.
So look forward to seeing everybody involved in the future. Before we wrap up today, we need everybody who remains to be involved in the rest of this process. We have the survey. We need everybody to pull out their cell phones, pull out the orange card, because we need for everybody here to be able to provide us with some feedback in terms of the collaboration survey. When you pull it up, you'll see that it'll ask you questions about your outlook, about your shared vision, about representative engagement, mutual trust and respect, the collaboration process, and also your involvement in the process thus far and comments. Some of you have filled this out before. We need everybody to complete this because this is your, right now, at the end of this day, feedback on this process. So we need to hear from everyone. Is there anyone who needs an orange card? Looks like we do have a few people. So we need everybody to complete the survey. It should only take you about a couple of minutes. And one of the great things about this survey is you're going to get to see what everybody has to say about the process. So we need everyone to complete the survey as quickly as possible so we can see what you have to say. And so those who have left early, some of them have had a chance to already complete the survey. So we really look forward to finding out what you all think about the process this far. And then also, we have the evaluation forms that everybody got a chance to receive earlier. After the survey, you can fill out the evaluation forms. But right now, we just want everybody focused on completing the survey as quickly as possible. And then I'll take a pulse to see if we have everybody completed the survey so we can look at the results super quickly. So we had 34 people who were able to participate. And for the outlook, it looks like the majority of you agree that your ideas about what you want to accomplish within building the engine seem to be the same ideas as others. So we can see the dispersion here, but with the majority agreeing that that's a true statement. Then next, we have strongly agreed to now is a good time to address the issues about which we are collaborating. We'll just go to the next. And then we also have agreement that the process we are engaged in is likely to have a real impact on the problem, which is awesome. So far, we're in alignment. We also have either strong support or agree that we are experiencing working collaboratively with other organizations in this effort has generally been positive. And let me just note, and we don't have anybody who disagreed with that. So I think that that's awesome. We have zero disagreement with that statement. Next, we have a majority saying they agree that I am concerned about the potential impact of this process on my own organization. This one we do have a little bit more dispersion again across all of the response options. In terms of the shared vision, again, the majority agree that they are confident that we will reach consensus on the best way forward for the conclusion of this process, which is awesome. So between strongly agree and agree, 70% are confident, but we do have at least a few people who disagree in terms of this sample. We know this is not everybody. We also have pretty good agreement in terms of the stakeholders are critical to the success of this effort are at the table. So for those who disagree, especially strongly disagree, we ask for you to help us understand who else needs to be involved, because it is absolutely a goal for this process to be representative and all the critical stakeholders being at the table. Next, we have the greatest number, but not as much agreement, that the planning team is generally reflective of the racial and ethnic diversity of our community. So we do have a majority agreeing, but we do have a significant portion between neutral and disagree. So that's an opportunity, obviously, for us to look at. Next, we have, I trust that the individual, hold on. Okay. Under the category of trust and respect, I have a lot of respect for the other people involved in this process. So far, it looks like we have the greatest agreement that that is true. So, hats off to everybody in the room that you believe a lot of the right people are here and you respect each other. Next, we also have agreement that the trust that the individuals involved in this effort are more interested in getting a good group decision than improving the position of them individually. So I think that's another really critical one, and we do have a few people who do disagree. Next, we have pretty much 65% between agree and strongly agree that the trust individuals involved in this effort will be willing to let go of an idea for one that appears to have merit. So we appreciate that people sense that, for the most part, people are in that area. We do have a strong number that's at neutral though, so this does appear to be another opportunity. Moving to the next one, 70% between strongly agree and agree are confident that the individuals involved in this effort will trust each other sufficiently to honestly and accurately share information, perceptions, and feedback, which is wonderful, but again, we do have 25% that are neutral, so I do think, again, that's an opportunity. Next, in terms of collaborative priorities, again, we can see this bar chart, and it looks like between shared vision and participation and engagement, those are the two tallest bars, with close to 60% saying that those are the priorities. When you're thinking about the planning team overall, how you would prioritize the list of 7 dimensions for collaboration. The smallest column is under representation. So again, that kind of came out earlier, and then next to that is structure, government, and management in terms of the lowest percentage. In terms of value, okay, the prior involvement, so basically how you've been involved before. We see that the greatest number of you have been involved in the summit, and then there are some people who are obviously new to today in terms of none of the above. So we have new people involved in the process and quite a dispersion across all the different ways that you've been involved. And then additional comments. We look forward to reading those comments. And Maggie, any final comments in terms of how all this data is going to be shared after today?
Well, so after Lauren and I sleep for a couple of days, first of all these notes get transcribed, and we're going to try to make a coherent report that will be posted on the website. If you'll allow us, we need to spend a couple of months taking in all the information and working with consultants and staff to lay out next year. So who's going to populate the task forces, what are the work plans for the task forces, and how are we going to go forward. The Real Change, Real Talk events will continue. And long around February, after we've had our little winter break, we'll begin to heat up all the activities and all the work. So you'll be, if you keep watching our website, which we work hard to keep updated, and look at our Facebook page, that'll keep you informed about what's going on.
We would love to have your feedback on the day. Please fill out the evaluation form. If you don't have one, raise your hand or get one before you leave. We also, if you did not have a chance to have your parking ticket validated, please make sure you stop at the desk on the way out. But most importantly, have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to connecting with you again. If you have index cards, please feel free to give them to me or to one of the facilitators. Thank you, have a wonderful evening.